Hey, before we get started with today's episode, I want to let you know that if you're planning for retirement or aren't sure where to start, we have a helpful checklist for you. We put together a guide called your pre-retirement checklist and have made it available for free on our website. This detailed checklist covers things pertaining to cash flow, Social Security, Medicare, asset allocation, and living a purposeful retirement. The link to download the checklist is listed in the episode description. Or you can go to wiserinvestor.com, scroll to the bottom, enter your email address, and then you'll have access to your pre-retirement checklist. Thanks for listening.
All right, welcome to the Wiser Retirement Podcast. We believe financial advice should always be conflict-free. I'm your host, Casey Smith, guiding you to financial freedom as my co-host today, Brad Lyons and Matthews Barnett. Hey, guys.
Hi, Casey.
How's it going?
Retiring is... something that we all talk about. I think I like it being referred to more as financial freedom. You have the option to do what you want to do when you want to do it. But the idea of retirement, we think about that, and it's a bit of a transition. And I'd say for a lot of our clients, they transition in just fine. I feel like a lot of people in this day and age, they just get frustrated where they are maybe with their jobs, and they're just done. They're over it. They have other things they want to be focused on, right? But there's also a segment of our client base that struggles with retirement a bit and finding purpose, right? And that's something we always tell them in our financial planning meetings is as we're doing that final retirement check. I say, so what are you going to do day one? Like I give you a week on the couch, but after a week on the couch, like what's your purpose, right?
Yeah, I mean, we obviously talk about financially how they get set for retirement, but you also have to figure out mentally and finding that purpose or their hobbies to transition fully to retirement because it is different.
And I think transition is really the optimum word here. We talk a lot financially around here about, transitioning your portfolio, transitioning your income, transitioning your investments, et cetera. But there's a psychological and sociological transition that occurs also.
Yeah, and also, it depends on sort of, I feel like your job and what you do. Sometimes you feel like you're just a cog in the wheel where, if you're a business owner and this has been your baby and now you're transitioning away from it and you're not going to be solving people's problems or selling that widget anymore, that maybe that's harder for you. I know with airline pilots, they can't believe the airline still flies without them, right? Because they had their purpose. They had a mission. They went and did that mission. I can see that in the military as well too. You get so wrapped up into what your mission and pursuit is that you kind of forget about who are you after you retire, and hey, there could be you're ready for retirement, but could just be there's new ground rules. You're at home more, and so you don't know the home rules as well you knew the work rules. Right. So you need to transition and find something to do in the normal business hours. There's guys at my golf club every week that I walk by and I go, man, they're here for breakfast, they're here for lunch, and then they disappear around dinner time, but they're probably, this is their job, right? And their wives are playing bridge or doing something that they've done for years, and they're not allowed to be home. That's my guess. But I don't know that we are qualified to really dive deep into the psyche on retirement transitions and what purposes are. And we have a great client, friend, Tara Arnold. She has her own counseling service. Yeah. Yes, she has her own counseling service that she owns. I think she does work with individuals, but she has a large group of people that she oversees. And so I thought, hey, let's bring Tara in and let's talk with Tara about this topic, and maybe she can enlighten us on transitions and life transitions.
Well, it's interesting that you say that we may not be, qualified to have these conversations, and that may be true, but what we do is we may facilitate them. We bring them to the forefront to go along with the rest of the financial planning that occurs, and this is a resource that we can offer to them.
Absolutely. Mm-hmm. Well, here's our interview with Tara, and guys, this was an easy podcast for us today, wasn't it? We'll let Tara do all the work. Hey, Tara, thanks for joining us today on the Wiser Retirement Podcast. This is pre-recorded on Zoom. and it looks like you're at work.
Yes, I'm at work.
So Tara, you're a client of Wiser Wealth Management. Now I suddenly feel like the tables have been turned, and now I'm sitting at your desk. And exactly right. So what would you tell me a little bit about your background and your training at WholeHeart Psychotherapy?
Absolutely. So I've been in the field of mental health since the 90s. So I'm dating myself, but a very long time. It's my life's passion. And so we here at WholeHeart, we have a whole spectrum of services for the entire lifespan, kids all the way up through retirement and beyond. And really help everyone try to deal with just whichever emotional transition is coming up. And I think that'll be pretty relevant today. I got my PhD in social work and have been a psychotherapist for quite a while, and just really, really enjoy helping people navigate different aspects of career changes, life changes, relationship changes, that sort of thing.
And how many professionals do you have at your group?
I myself have 20 associates, but we have another branch that's more sex therapy. And so they have probably another 12 or 13 or so too. So it's big. We have a lot of folks.
So it's not just you, it's a whole team of people, obviously.
Right.
So,
and the directors, we supervise them. So we're always involved in everything. We just can't see everyone.
right, sure, absolutely. So this quarter's theme in our podcast is focused on leaving a legacy. And one of the things that I see it come up a lot, especially with our airline pilot clients, is transitioning into retirement. And, if you think about so much of your identity can be wrapped into what you do as a career, whether that be piloting an airplane, or that could be your accounting firm or wealth management firm. But whenever you decide that it's time to hang that up, or you're forced to for medical reasons, whatever, there's always a bit of a transition period. And I don't always, men being men, they don't always talk about that. What I get is when the man sits out to the restroom, the woman says, or the wife says, hey, he's really struggling with this retirement, So I guess we'll start there. It's like, what we think retirement's supposed to be this happy-go-lucky, we're on a sailboat, we're golfing every day. And for most of us, that's not reality. It's great for marketing brochures. But really, we need. I know, and this is what I coach with my people is that you got to have a plan. You had a plan to work, right? You had a professional plan of whether it be certificates or education or your movement through a company. There was a plan there, right? So why shouldn't there be a psychological retirement plan in addition to that? So I'll get out of your way. I'll stop talking. I'll be the patient. And you tell me what I should be doing pre-retirement to get ready for the transition.
And Casey, you're teeing that up just perfectly, because it really is about preparation, right? Like, you're smart people. We've planned for every stage of our life. We plan to have kids. We plan our jobs, our careers. And so, of course, we need to put some energy and effort into creating like a vision or mission for our retirement. And so one of the articles I was looking at today was saying that we want to invest in our psychological retirement portfolio the same way we would invest in our financial portfolio. So what a great synergy we have here, right?
Right.
But basically, just like you're saying, a lot of times it's that pre-planning. So knowing I want to invest in my friendships, in my connections before I retire. I want to start cultivating or dust back off some of my hobbies and interests that I had before retirement. I also probably need to make some sort of budget, right? Which is your department. And then also just thinking about, day structure, meaning and purpose. So it really is important to kind of think about like what it is you want it to look like. And you mentioned, a lot of people don't anticipate the emotional part of this. You hear, oh, you're living the good life, when you retire. And so some people do feel like that, especially if there had been something negative that made them leave, or that they were really ready to leave. But if you love what you do, like, I don't know that I'll ever retire. But if you love what you do, then you really do suffer that like sense of loss, and you might have some struggle with creating your identity and feeling like yourself. If you think about, one of the first things that people ask you when they talk to you is, what do you do? And so if you're used to saying something big, like I'm a doctor, or I'm a pilot, or I'm a therapist, or a financial planner, and you're not doing that currently, right? Like, that can be a source of feeling a little bit less confident, a little bit less social. And so the more that you can kind of think about, like, what do you want that to be, and intentionally languaging it in a way that feels like you, can be really helpful. Like, I'm a teacher, I'm a mentor, I'm a memorist, I'm a artist, like really trying to think about like what still brings meaning and purpose to you, aligned with like who you've always been. Right.
Yeah,
So
I feel like for some people it's an easier transition than others. But what I've seen is we're not going off and riding the sailboat or playing the golf every day. But what I've been noticing is that you're having to retire to take care of mom, or having to retire to take care of dad. So you're actually rolling into a more stressful situation where people are dependent on you because you don't have time to work anymore. And so that's like a whole nother level. But when that family member passes away, then you're going to end up in the same position again of like, okay, well, what's my purpose? Because I had stopped to be a caregiver, and now my caregiving job is now done. So, I like what you said about starting investing in friends. Yeah, I can see that. I mean, especially as entrepreneurs, I don't know that, I can count my close friends on one hand, because my time is spent here, right? Or at kids' activities, and to have buddies I can go golf with and who I know really well. It takes time to develop those relationships,
Absolutely. And they really talk about too, like, we can minimize the impact and the support we do get from coworkers. So cultivating a relationship with coworkers outside of work too, to sort of proact that we're going to stay in touch. Like, this is not just about work. Like, I like you, I care about you. Like, let's
Sure.
do stuff together. Because, we don't necessarily always value that, right? We know it's coming. We know we're going to see all of these folks when we walk down the hall potentially, and then that's not there. And so there's our community starting to get involved in other kinds of groups, or other kinds of, like, I'm not retirement age, but I've been thinking about it. And so I went ahead and joined. I'm about to be an empty nester. So I was like, okay, so when my kids' friends aren't necessarily our friends anymore,
Right.
or we're not around them as much, then we joined a club, and we were like, okay, so we want to be outdoors, we want to be active, we want to be social. So what does that look like? Right. And so, like, that's just my empty nest career plan, but it would fit very well for retirement as well. But two, you're going to be spending more time with your spouse than ever, if your spouse is still alive. And so too, some couples will actually go to couples therapy before retirement, just to set boundaries and to set expectations. Some wives say you stayed home and all of a sudden your husband's in your space all the time. That's going to get annoying pretty quick, and them having a potential opinion about everything. And so the more that we talk about it, the more we plan, tell people about like our idea of what we're wanting, our goals, our hopes for retirement, versus everybody in their own silos having their ideas of what retirement's going to look like for the family and the person. It really gets some clear expectations set. And when problems arise, right, you can get support for that. So a lot of people like really thinking about long-term well-being, because just like you said, you might be caregiving and then that ends, or you might have this great network and then people pass away, or, things that could change. And so long-term well-being, finding places where you can talk about how you feel.
Yeah.
When you were mentioning earlier about how some people handle it really well and then it can kind of change, there's this thing called the sugar rush effect. And it says that right away, like, people that retire, sometimes they are so happy for a while when they do all the things, they do traveling, they do golf every day, they do all of the things, but then there can be a pretty significant decline for some folks in their emotional well-being and happiness because that doesn't have as much meaning and purpose as they had in the day-to-day for the long term of their life,
Yeah, that's interesting. I guess, you think COVID that in 2020 probably would have delayed some of that, I guess, because a lot of people retired but they have these big objectives, but then they couldn't actually execute on any of them. So there's still probably a delayed effect on that, if I had to guess.
Yeah, absolutely. And like you're saying too, for some of us, COVID might have felt like early retirement because we were home with people more often.
True.
We were still like working, right? But like just thinking about, that transition was hard and we didn't know it was coming and we all had to do our best to scramble and make it okay. Where this one is ideally we get to plan, when there's forced retirement or something like that. It's really helpful to get support and like expect it to be a journey, not a destination. Like that's sort of a good mantra for retirement too, is it's not like you retire and you're there. It's like, okay, now this is my life. What do I want and need at different stages of my retirement?
Are there signs of like, depression, I guess, in retirement, or what are some signs that you might have depression in retirement?
Yeah. So a lot of folks, when they don't enjoy it as much as they thought they would, right, they can feel isolated because people assume you're living the good life. So then to say you're not, and, especially with acquaintances and things, is probably going to feel uncomfortable. So some signs are that people might start worrying a lot about money, a lot about the future, a lot about, just day-to-day things. They might watch the news too much and then get really wrapped up in like a bunch of things that we can't control. Also, they might want to isolate. They might stop getting out. They might stop going and doing the things that they enjoy. And then they could get more and more sedentary and isolated. And then two kind of doom and gloom thoughts, if you're kind of thinking that the world is going to hell in a handbasket, you might really not enjoy that, right? And so I think you have to be careful with thinking more about what we gain in retirement versus what we lose. That's kind of a mantra in all of this, as well as it's easy to start focusing on loss of identity, loss of this freedom, whatever, and then not focus so much on what we're gaining through it. So yeah, so that can be some symptoms. And then two, watching how much we use substances. It can get real easy to start turning to alcohol or other drugs and things. And that can get really tricky and slippery if you don't have any accountability, of anywhere to be or something like that. So we do see too, a lot of folks that have surgery and then pain medication starts getting involved. And then that could be a very slippery slope in retirement too. And that's incongruent with people's life, right? They haven't ever had a substance issue. And then all of a sudden they do. That can be something that's hard to feel willing to address, but it's so important to ask for help from that too.
I my feet hit the floor every morning and I know exactly what my purpose is. I will reluctantly drag myself across town to a gym where I walk the neighborhood. I'm not a huge exerciser, but I know that I have to in order to, live a better life health wise. But after that, I know what the mission is, and I get derailed as an entrepreneur. I get derailed from that mission on a daily basis. But I know what my purpose is. What recommendation would you give to someone? And really just, it doesn't have to be in retirement, but that's probably, the context of our conversation of having a purpose and finding that purpose. How do you find a purpose that when your feet hit the floor, you're excited to get moving?
Yeah. And I think some of that is insight, right? Like, who are we as people? What does motivate us? What lights us up in therapy? And when we're coaching entrepreneurs, I have a group where I teach other therapists how to build their practices. And it's like, what would you do for free? What clients would you see for free just because you enjoy it so much? It's easy because it's natural and talented. You're talented in it. So some of it is like knowing who you are, what's important, not what people say that should be. And then really trying to define that. So kind of creating this kind of pathway for yourself. So, am I about animals? Do I love caring for elderly people? Do I love babies? Do I love, river ecology? Like what do I really like and care about? Because then you can get in line with how to do things involving that. So creating purpose can be really important. And some people even do what they call like bridge work or encore jobs, where it's, they do find that a lot of people that retire and do the best do some sort of volunteer work or altruism. They do some sort of kind of second act career. So maybe they start a business they always dreamed of, or maybe they still consult with what they used to do in a way that fits their life better. So of course, continuing some of that same meaning and purpose for certain people would make a lot of sense. But creating community to help you be able to help others. They say that if you move into a senior living facility, it actually helps with happiness a lot, because you can help each other. You can help your neighbors. You can, go to the community center and find friends and hang out and be social. And so, those are some things that, can definitely help build some purpose in life. When you mentioned earlier, though, the caregiving part, people need to be careful that it is something they want to do, not what they think they should do, because that's actually associated with a decline in mental health. And of course, like it's really hard to care for parents and that sort of thing. And some people find a lot of meaning in it, but if you don't, and you can get help for that, like trying not to do something from an obligation standpoint. So that's something else that's also important, is what might create meaning for one person definitely does not mean it creates meaning for everyone.
Right.
And you having the confidence and the wherewithal to communicate that or set boundaries around that.
I would think marriages probably go through another test. I feel like there's different phases, right? There's the newlyweds, there's the first child, right? Then there's probably the third child, because you got to switch out of man-to-man to zone defense. And then there's probably, career, changes in career. It's probably another stressor. Kids leaving is probably another stressor. Now, how do you deal with that? Because at that point, you've probably been married for a long time for a lot of people. Is it even worth having marriage counseling at that point, when you're been married for 40 something years?
It's definitely the time. It's always the time, Casey. No, but like you're saying, it's such a beautiful opportunity to redefine and realign. And a lot of couples do. My aunt, she did such a great job with it. I had never heard of it at that point. She did this like 2 decades ago, but they literally had couples sessions before retirement, because she's like, I'm doing my art and I don't want you in my business all the time. Like, what are you going to do during your day so you're not in my space? Be around, And so they had some really good frank conversations about what each person needed to be happy in that context. And so, you do just think about what it is that you envision, your personalities, right? Some people could like work together, and so they're going to be happy as peas in a pod to be like together all the time. And I would say the vast majority, if you made it through COVID, you probably will make it. True. That's a new test that most people did not have previously to us. But it is worth like those conversations, communications, being honest, not tiptoeing around things, just really trying to navigate and create a shared vision sometimes too. It might be that you want to move to the lake because you both love water and boats. And so you're going to do that,
So what I'm hearing is search for your passions, to find hobbies, to get behind and get involved, cultivate your friend network, have an honest discussion with your spouse about the expectations. Actually, I had a client executive take an early retirement package, and the next thing I know, he was back at work again, different company. And I was like, hey, what's going on here? You got this new job? And he's like, well, basically, I started going on the grocery shopping runs, and I was told it's either I find a new job or she's divorcing me. It is a fairly young executive, so it sort of made sense. Obviously, financially, it all made sense, but yeah, you just kind of laughed and both kind of laughing about it. But I think there was some truth behind the laughter of having a plan. And every couple functions so differently. I have another dear couple that fuss and fight right in front of me every time, and even on the phone. I hear her fussing at him when he's just talking to me on the phone. Yet, she had to go in the hospital during COVID, and he was a complete wreck. I mean, they just love each other so much. So every family gets along a little bit differently, but definitely having a game plan and good communication sounds like is a plus there. And I see that, especially for my airline people. A third of our client base are related to aviation in some form or fashion. And when you think about it, the one spouse being gone 15 nights out of the month normally, and then all of a sudden they're there for another 15. I remember literally sitting down at a pilot's house, and I said, look, you pick up all these extra trips. There's no reason to do this. You need to focus on health in your body, and you're at the pinnacle of your career. So just take the round trip to Greece once a month and call it done. And, and it's funny because he looks at his schedule and he says to me, so I don't have to fly this trip next week. I said, no, you can cancel the trip. And all of a sudden his wife is like, no, not next week. I have plans. She didn't elaborate, but she had plans and he was supposed to be at the house.
Yes. Oh my God. That's awesome.
So it's obviously good communication. What else do you think that we should add to our list?
Like really creating day structure. So even if you don't want to do the encore job or do bridge employment or anything like that, like you said, making sure you get up and your feet hit the floor and that you do something, right? And so what people find the most happiness in, and that aligns with self-care too, because like you said, if I don't get up and go to the gym, the likelihood of it happening that day, I feel like exponentially decreases by the hour. And so if it's my intention and it gets my energy going and my brain online and all of that stuff. So it's sort of like, just like you would with the rest of your life, creating a plan for each day so that you're getting out and you're doing things that do bring stimulation and like help you engage in the world. And find meaning and purpose, right? So they say that if you volunteer or work at least 20 hours a week, it's associated with a ton more happiness and joy in retirement. Yeah. So again, it really is important to find those things, if you really believe in helping the homeless, right? Volunteering at a mission, volunteering for at a food pantry, that sort of thing, just to kind of keep a community building, right? Because then again, you have some coworkers that you could then socialize with and then might become friends. And so the day structure is important. And then setting small goals. And for the pilots, they probably need to set large goals. They tend to have a hard time in retirement sometimes because they are so used to, they like competition, they're assertive, they've got strong personalities sometimes. And so if not, sometimes people start to get impulsive because they have this energy that they need to release. And so the more goals they set, like, go get scuba certified or go learn French before you go to France, or, like setting small goals or big goals can really also help that drive, find somewhere for all that energy to go, not at your spouse.
Right. Well, with we haven't talked about yet either is grandkids. I find that there's two types of grandparents. There's the ones that say, I raised kids already, that's your job, and they are totally disconnected from their grandchildren. And then there's other ones that I feel like they're basically voluntarily raising their grandchildren. They don't have to. It's just like their duty, right? And both are fine. Nothing wrong with either approach. But obviously, being really invested in your family could be healthy. I think there's unhealthy, and that's more of a financial discussion. I've actually told people before that when asked, they say, "What's my greatest risk for my retirement?" And looking at their outflows, I'd say your children, because financially supporting them when it's hard for you to do that. is not something you want to get into for sure. But there's also being mentally engaged with grandkids and helping them. I kind of see our job as to get our kids into a higher orbit than we're in, and just kind of keep successfully launching them. And so being mentors is great. I think if that's what you're built for, if that's what you want to do, right? Just as you said earlier.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. And that's exactly part of like telling your family, your whole family, like what you envision, setting those boundaries, not doing things out of obligations or shoulds, because just because your next door neighbor wants to voluntarily raise their grandkids, if you don't, that's okay. No judgment. Don't try your hardest not to judge what you know in your gut and in your heart, and align with that spirit, align with who you really are. Or else it does really kind of tax our mental health. And part of the day structure is also preventative for mental health struggles or well-being struggles, right? Getting up, sleeping well, eating well, being active, avoiding alcohol and drugs as much as you can, all of that stuff can really help make sure that you're staying healthy. And so too, trying to think about, what is it that you really enjoy with your family? Do you want to travel with them a little bit, or define it differently than just like caring for the children?
Right.
Yeah. And I think earlier too, you had mentioned kind of keeping your brain sharp, right?
Yeah. Right.
And so, they say that
you gonna suggest that we all do Sudoku puzzles? Is that where you're headed with it?
That was next. You beat me to the punch, Casey, darn it. So really, when you think about, they say for every extra year you work in some capacity, you have 3.2% less cognitive decline each year. So definitely keeping engaged in something can be very important. But then, like you're saying too, the more that we do kind of keep setting goals, challenging ourselves, reading, like you said, doing the crosswords if you like those, or the Sudoku puzzles. But when you don't use it, you lose it, right? So if we stop engaging in things and we just sit down and watch Netflix all day, like we're gonna cognitively decline. That just is what it is. Unless you're watching like, how to do brain surgery on something, which is not normally what keeps our Netflix attention that long. But it is like being intentional about it, like being mindful, deliberate, intentional, is very important in this whole process, right? Again, it's not a destination, it's a journey. And so at different points of the journey, you might have anxiety, or different points in the journey, you might be happier than you've ever been, or different points of the journey, you might need to like revamp a new plan. So just really thinking about yourself and who you are and what you enjoy, and that's going to help align a lot of these things. And if you don't know, that's okay. Like you can go to counseling and like have people really pay attention to you and really help you articulate it and cultivate it and identify it. And then too, sometimes just being around other people help you hear what other people are doing. We have this list that's called the Adult Pleasurable Event Schedule, and it's got like 250 items about like what adults like to do. And so it kind of helps you, brainstorm and gives you some examples of what you used to like to do, what you do like to do, what you wanted to do but couldn't because you didn't have the time, that sort of thing.
That's interesting. I have a friend of mine who passed away last year. He's one of our first, actually he was our first non-family member client back in 2000. So he went back a long ways, and thankfully he didn't die of COVID, but he died of other complications. That was kind of sad, but he played softball. So he's like 70 years old out playing softball in a super senior league, right? So that's not something I would ever. He'd always complained about his knees, and I was always like, "Well, why don't you stop playing softball?" He's like, that was like he loved baseball. That was like his born thing. So even at 70 years old, there's other Ben out there to create enough a league to play softball, which is interesting. Yeah. This generation is starting to pass away now, but honestly, I think it's my favorite generation to work with. It's the people that are in their 80s and 90s right now. Last bit of that World War II generation. And something that I've noticed just as a non-educated observer like yourself is that, in that generation, the moms were stay at home. And for the women who were in charge of their household finances, their minds were so sharp. Their bodies failed them, but their minds were sharp all the way through. And the women who pretty much, husband went up to work every day, they raised kids, but then their job kind of stopped and they didn't really handle finances. The husband still took care of all the finances. Brains pretty mushy. Not quite with us those last 5 or 6 years or so. And that was a testament to me. It's like, oh, wow, we got to make sure that both husband and wife stay engaged in doing something, because you are correct. If you don't use it, you lose it. And they just hadn't thought about, just the basic finances stuff for so long that I don't think they had as sharp of a minds and could process things well in their 80s as their counterparts did. So I don't know if you can ever use that, but with working moms out there today and husbands obviously too, that's probably less of an issue.
Yeah, absolutely. And again, that brings a whole different challenge of, who retires when, and do you do it at the same time, or do you do it in stages?
Yeah.
Because it is such a difference in like your anxiety levels, right? If you quit everything at one time and there's not revenue coming in anymore, surprise expenses can really stress people out and they can feel trapped. So it's important to really find ways to manage anxiety and, just different depression pieces that might come along with retirement. So depression, anxiety management, as well as keeping sharp, people like really finding good anxiety reduction techniques. Meditation can be really helpful. Doing relaxation practices. Like we just got a hot tub and it is like everybody in my family made fun of me, but everyone is always in it. It's so
right.
And it's good for your joints for those of us that are not, spring chickens anymore. But really getting out in nature, having a gratitude practice is really big too. We mentioned earlier, not thinking about losses, but thinking about gains, really trying to have that mindset shift. So gratitude definitely helps us think about what's going right versus what's going wrong. Right. And if we do have a habit of worrying, really trying to notice that and be mindful of it and trying to stop that, train and get engaged in something else so that you don't just sit and worry about your family or your grandkids. And being physically active is so important, keeping our bodies active keeps our brain active. So that's good for mental health resilience as well as a cognitive resilience.
Right.
So those are some things we also try to think about just from that mental health side. Is it's going to be natural to have some of that come up. I just already realize, as I'm getting closer to 50, just thinking about life in a different way. And when your body starts to have struggles that you're not used to, you're like, oh God, I don't want to start complaining about everything all the time, and so it's hard.
I think about some of families here in our hometown here in Marietta, and I'm starting to see patterns. So I see successful entrepreneurs, former CEOs of our hospital system, and it's very interesting that they have left those big, higher profile jobs. You see them at the Mary Country Club and the men's lounge, pretty much from 8:30 to 3. And then I pass by them at Marietta Rotary, or I know they're in Kiwanis. And so they've occupied their time through volunteer work, community work. And then their obviously their physical sport is golf, but they're not riding the carts. They're pushing the carts, right? They're pushing the walking carts. So, So I think I never really put those two and two together, but they really are kind of modeling what a transition looks like by doing that. And it makes sense. I mean, they were really successful in their professional careers. They ought to be successful in their retirement as well, right? Not just wasting away.
Mhm. Yeah. And again, if they didn't pre-plan that, right, then that could
Yeah.
be a little bit more confusing. So really getting in front of it, really creating that good portfolio to get ready for retirement, not just like run up to the finish line and then be like, what now? Right. That will be harder for you.
Correct.
So
And it changes too.
just
You know,
thinking about like,
I was saying it changes too, because, you know, you talk to a early professional in their 40s about what retirement looks like. It definitely changes by the time you're 65 or 67, partially because our bodies change and our idea of what we physically want to be doing in the future might be exhausting, you know. I always kind of chuckle about the RV thing, because I think, oh, I want to, you know, young people talk about the RVs. Like, you know how hard it is to like hook up an RV, maintain an RV, crawling around, you know, unhooking the RV. I mean, there's a lot of work that goes into that.
flat tires, directions, all
Right.
stuff, right? Like, oh my gosh. Yeah. Making me think too, like my grandpa, he just passed away like 5 or 7 years ago, but he was almost 100. And we all marveled at how well
Wow.
he did it. He had been like a salesperson. And so he continued to like go visit people all the time. And he would go to the gym and like really just, I think, go around and chat with people and do a little bit of exercise.
Yeah.
But he was a gardener. So he would take, you know, the tomatoes or whatever to his pharmacist, or he would take them to, and he just made a point of cultivating community wherever he went.
Yeah.
And so he was happy as a clam, because he had found, and he volunteered at like the, what's it called? I can't remember. In the Marietta, it's sort of like a homeless shelter thing, Must Ministries.
Oh, Must Ministries. Yeah, sure.
Yeah. So, you know, and he really figured it out, and he is very involved at church. And like, so, you know, he was always trying to figure out like how to engage with people, because that was like his life force, you know.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, you know, this conversation, I had an idea of where we were headed, but it's really made me realize that there's this financial component, and then there's a psychological component, and they really have to work together to create that sense of security and happiness. So I don't know, maybe we're onto a book here, Tara. Maybe it's how to be financially and psychologically fit for retirement. It's a terrible title, but we'll have to come up with something different.
We'll do better.
Well, again, you can go to Tara's website, WholeHeart psychotherapy.net, and you can see her bio as well as her team of psychologists there as well. And Tara, is there anything else we should know about your firm? I know you're pretty booked, so maybe they won't be finding you, but they'll find someone that you've vetted to be at that firm if they want to talk about this further, or maybe have other areas that they would like to focus on.
Absolutely. I just want to stress, we do kind of help across the lifespan. So, and we have a lot of telehealth. So even for folks that we're in Buckhead, so for even folks that are not in town, it's very accessible on telehealth. And we just are very versed at supporting people through life transitions and making just their quality of life better, along with all the traditional mental health pieces as well. So we are here to help.
All right. You can find the link in the show notes. Tara, thank you. I enjoy all our conversations. I always feel like I'd leave a better person. So thank you for doing what you do and being so great at it.
Thank you for having me, Casey. This was great. It's so good to see you all.
All right. Talk to you later.
Thanks for listening to a Wiser Retirement podcast. We hope you enjoyed today's episode. Make sure to subscribe wherever you're listening, that way you don't miss any new episodes. We would also appreciate if you could leave a rating and review. If you have any questions about anything that was discussed today, head to wiserinvestor.com and reach out. We would love to hear from you. This episode was produced and edited by Lilton Moore.